Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers, sisters, and friends. And welcome back to another episode of Voice of Istiqlal. So Istiqlal TV, Istiqlal Media Group, of course, we have this program on this platform in order to bring conversations about the Uyghur issue to you people, brothers and sisters and friends in the English-speaking language. And we invite Uyghurs themselves and scholars with an expertise in what's happening to the Uyghurs, their history, their current events that are happening in the region, to give us a very a unique perspective on Uyghur issues from their own perspective and from a scholarly background as well. In the last few days, we've seen the so-called Xinjiang police files, a massive Chinese data leak, unprecedented, that's shared online with various media organizations across the world. The faces of 5,000 detained Uyghurs in this a leak which is probably unprecedented in its scale, and we're very happy to discuss some of these issues and the broader issues about the Uyghurs in East Turkestan. We're very glad to have and grateful to have on the program today Dr. Khaled Beydoun, who is a professor of law, and Mrs. Rukiye Turdush, who is a researcher and Uyghur rights advocate. Thank you very much for joining, and good evening.
Thank you very much.
Or depending on where you are, it may be good morning. My first question to you, Sister Mrs. Rukiya, just to get a bit of a background for the brothers and sisters listening. In your opinion, why is China so terrified of the Uyghur Muslims? Why are they trying to get rid of them?
I would like to answer this question very directly. It's simple and very directly, because there's a several aspect actually to consider. First, and the very important aspect is China conquered the Uyghurs' homeland, East Turkestan. And China is fully aware that East Turkestan does not belong to them. So that's why they look forward to get rid of the true owners of this land. That's the most important reason, I think. And there's other aspects too. And China aspires to be superpower, as you know, and to expand globally through the new Silk Road, through Central Asia to the Europe. And as a result, they would like to clean up their gateway before expansion, because East Turkestan serves as a gateway in geostrategically in this region. So another reason is Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims, as you know, is very distinct than Han Chinese. We are different race, belong to Turkic race, and we are Muslim. We believe in Islam, and we have different cultures, totally different than Chinese culture. So Chinese communist Muslim ideology have no tolerance for diversity, and they hate any other ideology or any other race rather than Chinese. So they wish to just to get rid of these people because we don't look like them, we don't talk like them, we don't believe their ideology, and their ideology is, especially Islam, is different than them. So they were thinking Islam, especially religion and Uyghurs ideology, is little threat for them. They have seen in this way. That's why they don't like us. They would like to. That's so many issues behind this: racism, Islamophobia, many issues mixed, and the Chinese nationalism as well. So they would like to. That's why they want to get rid of this the Uyghurs from there and other Turkic Muslims.
Thank you very much for that that background introduction, Dr. Khaled. You're one of the leading scholars in the U.S. On national security, on the war on terror and civil rights, and you've written extensively and researched extensively on this subject. What can you say are some of the similarities and differences between Islamophobia in the West and in China, in your experience?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for holding this really important conversation. There's a range of really important differences. One of the key differences is, was just identified by Rukiya, the fact that in China, the Muslim population that is being targeted, the Uyghur, are indigenous. They're native to that land. They hold dominion over East Turkistan. It is their land, and they seek to make it their own nation state. So Islamophobia being unleashed by the Chinese government, the communist government in Beijing, is against an indigenous native Muslim people, which is distinct from what's happening in the West, across Europe in places like France, the UK, Spain, and in the United States. The Muslim populations are largely immigrant populations, and Islamophobia in the West converges, very ominously with xenophobia based on this idea that Muslims are a foreign immigrant people, and in China, obviously, they're indigenous. So beyond that sort of kind of contextual distinction is a really important difference in terms of scale and gravity of how Islamophobic violence is being enforced by the respective governments in China. In my opinion, China is the most extreme and nefarious form of global Islamophobia because it's being unleashed by an authoritarian government which has no legal or constitutional restraints. There's no semblance of religious freedom in China. There's no protection of free speech, freedom of assembly. That's why we see the state-sponsored Islamophobia in China rise to the level of genocide. In places like France and the United States, comparatively speaking, there's still constitutional protections where individuals, even though Muslims are being persecuted in these places, there's still the theoretical and legal protection of religious freedom. That's why, in my opinion, barring something cataclysmic in the West, you would never see ethnic cleansing or genocide of Muslims reach the level of genocide that we see happening in real time in China right now. There's so much more to say, but those are two of the really key distinctions I cherished, obviously in terms of gravity and scale of Islamophobia in China. And then second, it's really important to understand for individuals who aren't familiar with this topic is that, the Uyghur are living on their land. They're indigenous to that land in ways that immigrant Muslims in the West are not indigenous.
Thanks very much for that. Those insights. So you use the word genocide, of course, and this is something that's gained more and more awareness as a term for describing what's happening to the Uyghurs in East Turkestan. And Mrs. Rukiye, you were giving evidence in the Uyghur Tribunal last year. Just briefly, why do you believe that China's atrocities against the Uyghurs actually constitute genocide?
According to United Nations Genocide Convention, to be defined as a genocide, it has to have intention and at the same time has to have that 5 category, the acts. And this is whatever happening in East Turkestan is fit to these 5 category. And we know that China intentionally killing, intentionally trying to get rid of these people, and we can prove that intention. So, for example, we can see that they mass arrest for the detentions for these people, not because of they are criminals. You can see in this, just a few days ago, they released the pictures that 2,900 of mugshots. You can see that there's including kids under 14, girls even, and that over 73 years old women. Those people doesn't have any crime. Okay, so they were just arrested, systematically arrested because of their ethnicity, because of their religion, because of their culture, because of their race. So if China do not have an intention to get rid of the whole nation because of their religion and ethnicity, why they have to systematically arrest these people even they don't have any crime? And another, you can see that the Chinese high-level officials has a lot of derogatory words. For example, just Xinjiang police files that revealed a few days ago and say that Xinjiang said that should anyone try to escape. So for them they are nothing. The people is just like not a human being. It's like already they dehumanize it. And before too, there is a lot of propaganda that the Chinese Youth Communist League propaganda audio was distributed in Chinese social media and the Chinese state media too. They say that the Islam is cancerous tumor. So these people has a disease. We have to arrest them, cure their disease. That means they see Islam as a disease and they see the ideology of Uyghurs as a disease and the cancerous tumor. For them to get rid of the cancerous tumor, put them in the detention centers, torture them, and they kill them. So, and these words, you can see that how they dehumanize them. You can also, the Xi Jinping himself, he also opened the green light for the mass detention, torture, and the killing too. He said that absolute no mercy. When they said absolute no mercy, the other officials, Chinese officials, whatever, they can do anything, whatever they want, they can kill, they can do anything secretly. So like we also have seen the crematories that built beside those detention centers, that it was published by Radio Free Asia. And so maybe these people were sold for organ harvesting and their body was burned. So those kind of atrocity was happening over there, and these are explain the China's intention to get rid of these people. And the acts also, what they're doing, those policies, what they implementing in East Turkestan, for example, forced labor policy, separating families, men and the women, separate them, ripping apart the families. So that's going to contribute to population reduction, right? Because the families cannot stay together. They separate the women and the men. And they also using the other policies, for example, it's like a forced marriage and many different policies. Here I can count it. It's tons of policies that using how they using sterilization policy for the women. According to Adrian Zan's research, starting 2017, 98% women were sterilized in Kashgar area alone. So like in this way, the Uyghur population since 2017 dramatically decreased 50%. And it's going, the Chinese government's target is 0. So that's mean they would like to clean up this, get rid of this population. This is not like the mass killing with the gunshot before the world, but it's the same thing. They get rid of this population with sterilization, separating families, rip it apart the families, and the forcibly remove the children from their home. And in this way, they destroying the whole nation. And the United Nations Genocide Convention did not say that in the definition kill, they said destroy. Using destroy, this word is, and what they're doing all fit these 5 acts in the Genocide Convention. That's why I can say this is definitely genocide. And then
Dr. Khaled, you were nodding your head during that description of what's happening to the Uyghurs. Presumably you agree that this should be characterized and described as genocide. What would you say to those commentators or even statesmen and women who refuse to describe it with this term?
Yeah, I think a great point brought up by Rukiye is the fact that we can't just only narrowly imagine genocide in its most sort of mass killing form. There are distinct forms of genocide that unfold today, especially in this modern moment where mass killing is not only going to be not acceptable to the global community, but also obsolete. There are more efficient ways to rid of a people that fall far short of mass killing, and they're more effective than mass killing. So I kind of like the term cultural genocide, because the objective of the Chinese regime is to gradually and sort of diabolically do away with the Uyghur people, not only the people in terms of them as living beings, but the culture, the history, the narrative, the ethos, the entire state of being of that nation of people. And the way you do that is through, a forced assimilation process, that being a major prong of it. And Rukiye brought that up very early on, that it's really key to understand that in addition to this being a genocidal regime, this is very much a racial and a racist project by the Beijing Communist Party, built on Han supremacy, the notion that even though China is home to 50 plus distinct ethnicities and peoples, including the Uyghur, that the state's objective is to sort of impose and forcefully impose Han supremacy, Han culture, Han ideology, Han traditions upon anyone and everyone within that land. And the way you do that is through means that are less visible and more latent, right? And one of them is, putting children in brainwashing orphans in schools, stationing individuals who are part of the Communist Party and who are Han into the homes of Uyghur families, to construct this really cutting edge surveillance system in cities in Xinjiang, Urumqi, Kashgar, so forth and so on, where people are afraid to express their Uyghur identity. And Uyghur identity, we know, is typically expressed through Muslim identity, through religious exercise, right? So the more people become fearful of being who they are as Uyghur and Muslim, the more this assimilationist project is successful on the part of the Beijing regime. So, and that is what is, best, in my opinion, characterized as cultural genocide. You don't have to kill a people physically to do away with the culture, the history, the religion, and the traditions of the people. And we can look to places like Australia, for instance, or here in the United States, where Native American and Aboriginal populations, places like Canada also, Aboriginal communities, were killed en masse, but their histories, their cultures, their ways of life were decimated, and the state project of genocide was achieved without the sort of specific aim of mass killing. So it is a cultural genocide. Governments that disagree are either being disingenuous, they're not analyzing what's taking place in real time in East Turkestan, or second, they're being silenced and they're being swayed by the geopolitical might and the economic hegemony of China. And that is, sort of the principal variable as to why governments across the world, especially Muslim majority governments, right, and we have to sort of call them out directly, are not doing the right thing in calling what is taking place in East Turkestan is either at minimum an ethnic cleansing and at maximum a genocide.
I would like to add some point. Sorry, I would like to add some point here to the Dr. Khalid. I totally agree. There is a cultural genocide, but there is the physical genocide, actual genocide too, not only cultural genocide, because people were in the mass detention center. We don't know how many people are still alive. They released a few people, but these people are sick and dying in 1 year, 2 months, 3 months. And one of my uncle was released after 2 years, and after 5 months he was arrested again, and we don't know where he was right now. So like a lot of people, we don't know. This is thousands of millions of people, what happened to them. They were already killed, or what's wrong with them, what China did to them. This is physical killing, just hidden from the world. We don't know yet. This is exactly genocide, and they have an intention to get rid of this nation. This is a genocide, exactly fit the United Nations genocide definition. And at the same time, they get rid of the culture too. So it's a cultural genocide as well.
I mean, whenever I hear what's happening. Yeah, go ahead.
If I can add really quickly, I think Rukiye is exactly right. So there's multiple definitions, legal definitions of genocide, where they all sort of accord is the intention is what matters most, right? It is if the objective of the state, and we know in China, a very deliberate objective and project of the state to get rid of a people, then we meet the definition of genocide. And the second point that she brings up that is exactly right is we don't know what's taking place within these concentration camps, right? Because there's no freedom of press, there's no freedom of speech, there's no transparency in China to allow objective journalists or neutral and objective human rights assessors to go in there and examine what's taking place. What we do know from these reports that came out a couple of days ago is there's explicit directives on the part of, beyond just sort of like mass torture taking place, there are explicit directives coming from Chinese police to say that if anybody resists or attempts to escape, then they're supposed to be killed on sight, right? Uyghurs who attempt to resist in any way are killed on sight. So we know that there is mass killing taking place and mass torture taking place. But we need to know what the scale is, but the Chinese government is restricting that, and they're likely restricting that because it would be an admission of guilt.
I mean, it's hard not to remember.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, the population reduction also the explained physical killings too, because they're sterilizing women, 98% women, and the Uyghur population is at 50% already, and their target is 0. So this is actually the physical killing too, You don't have to see the mass scale of physical killing, like with gunshot.
Yeah, I suppose in a horrible way, it's a more efficient way of getting rid of a population, just to stop the cut off their ability to have children and so forth. And surely that, I mean, I'm no legal expert, but surely that must rank quite highly up there when it comes to kind of crimes against humanity. But it's hard not to, listening to this, it's hard not to think of and remember kind of flashbacks to European policies. You mentioned Aborigines, you mentioned Native Americans, for example, Khaled. But I just recall that what many talk about as the twin impulses of colonialism, and in the French context, for example, number one to dominate, and number two to civilize, right? And I wonder when I see examples of these re-education camps. So we have the domination, the physical domination of their bodies, clearly outlined, but this attempted assimilation and removal of their cultural identity, their religious identity, their values. I can't help but see echoes of policies from the UK, from France, from, I don't know about the American contents, but certainly there's been, since at least the last 10 or 20 years, there's been quite an open assimilationist trend, when it comes to talking about Muslims as minorities. Fair enough, as minorities, yeah. But am I reading too much into this? Is there not really a causal link here, or is there some kind of a connection here?
It is. There is a. I'm sorry, I jump in. There is a definitely connection, because the Chinese is settlement colonialism too. What China doing? It's not. It's different than other colonialism, because they would like to bring the settlers demographically. Imagine the billions of Han Chinese they want to bring to this region right now in East Turkistan. That's why they want to use the genocide, implement genocidal policy, get rid of the native population over there, true owners of this country, and they would like to create space for the settlers. That this is very similar to what they to the indigenous people, the Canadians before and Americans too. But one difference is here. One similarity is like this, and difference is here. We were nation state before. We are not the indigenous people as categorized in United Nations. We are indigenous to that country, East Turkestan, that land, but we are not the indigenous people categorized as US, because we had a nation state and we had the country before, and the China invaded this country, the Chinese communists, in 1949. Before 1949, the Manchu invaded this country, and before the Manchus, the Mongol invaded, and those kind of invasion is always happened there, but we had the independent states before Mongol invaded, and after Manchus invasion, we defeated Manchus and we established East Turkestan Independent Republic in 1993. 1933 it was East Turkestan Islamic Republic, and 1944 again twice. But this, I'm so sorry. So it's like we built like that countries there that's totally different than those indigenous people in Canada and the US. They didn't have nation state like. That's why they were thinking this place is. Like a terra nulli. So this place there is no country, so we can we can build the country. We build the country here. They were not nation states. So this concept is, compared to the Uyghurs issue, is very different. Actually, this is, China cannot bring the state integrity law too, because we were a country, we were a nation state before even we were not accepted or recognized by the United Nations. We had a government, we had an army, we had the passports, we had everything at that time. So we are exactly as nation states. So the China invaded after Manchu. So at that time, a decolonization at that time, and ironically, during the decolonization, China invaded this country, and other big powers are silent because of their own benefit. And that's how we different than indigenous people's issue. But the settlement colonialism is very similar. I think Dr. Khalid knows more, so he can tell us more detail.
Yeah, Dr. Khalid, I mean, you described as well quite well the differences between Chinese Islamophobia and Western Islamophobia. What are some of the similarities?
Yeah, when I was hearing Rukiye speak, I couldn't help but to think about two really important things. So, you know, in the United States, we call the Western expansion of the American settler colonial experience as manifest destiny. The idea that a white supremacist government had to do away with, you know, indigenous populations, but also enslave, you know, African individuals, you know, from abroad to carry out their objective of, you know, white supremacist colonialism. That is very analogous to what's taking place in China, but instead we have a Han supremacist regime expanding their, you know, domestic but also geopolitical reach into East Turkestan, because East Turkestan has considerable value in terms of the resources it holds, but also because of its proximity in expanding China's, you know, global ambitions tied to the Belt Road Initiative, tied to the Digital Silk Road. You know, holds tremendous economic and geopolitical value. I think one common thread that is worth noting that ties Western American Islamophobia, European threads of Islamophobia, and also what's taking place in China is the global war on terror, right? The American global crusade, which was launched in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks, equipped the French government, the English government, the Indian government, and also the British government with a range of things, especially, you know, this new language of counterterrorism, this new legal commitment to fighting Islamic terrorists. So anybody who fell underneath that banner, right? Anybody who was Muslim, anybody who expressed their, you know, Islamic identity in ways, in conspicuous ways, whether it was the hijab or, you know, for men, beards and wearing thobes and wearing kufis, things of that nature, was labeled a presumptive terrorist under this new logic and vocabulary of the war on terror. And that essentially extended a wider door for the communist government in China to crack down and persecute the Uyghur people in deeper and, you know, more violent ways. But not only in deeper and more violent ways, but in ways that was justified by the principal superpower in the world, the United States, right? So just as long as the Chinese government could brand and caricature Uyghur people as presumptive terrorists, and they can persecute, they can inflict genocide, they can inflict all, you know, a whole host, an array of mass terror on the people under this banner. So even though Islamophobia might look differently and is enforced distinctly in China than it is in the United States, the language and the logic, you know, under this new global mandate of the war on terror, essentially extended carte blanche to the Chinese government to intensify and exacerbate its crackdown on the Uyghur people. And we saw this take place in the last decade, whether it was through the expansion of the concentration camps beginning in 2014. They grew in number, they grew in terms of size and scale, whether it's the brainwashing orphanages, whether it's the harvesting of organs, whether it's the forced marriages of Han men and Uyghur women. You know, a whole, you know, macabre of mass violence that is being justified by the war on terror is what ties this global Islamophobic phenomenon, you know, across nation states and across continents.
I mean, so we've looked at white supremacy analog. We've looked at settler colonial expansionist colonialist analog, the war on terror, Islamophobia. What can you see from Western history, maybe the Western experience and the trajectory that can perhaps make us or give us ideas about how to stem, stop, or reverse the policies that are happening in East Turkestan right now? How do you fix
Yes.
this
Is that
problem? How
question
do
for me?
you stop it? Yeah,
Is-
Dr. Khaled or whoever wants to chime in.
Yeah, I'll say really quickly. I think the two, and I'll be brief, and I'll let Rukiye speak on this as well. Two really important interventions are, what does the transnational human rights community mean anymore if it can't stand against and speak up against one of the, if not the principal and most ominous form of genocide taking place in real time? What does the United Nations mean at this day and age if it can't take a formal stance and invoke direct action against the genocide taking place? It means nothing, right? So this is an indictment on international, transnational human rights organizations. If they can't do anything, then they mean nothing. The second intervention I'd say that is needed at this juncture is, this is a Muslim population that we're speaking about, right? So what are Muslim majority governments doing? What does this say about them when they're either silent or doing nothing, or actually working in conjunction with the Chinese regime to crack down on Uyghur? These are failed states in terms of their human rights mandates and positions with regard to Muslim populations, but also us as a global Muslim ummah, as a global Muslim population. What are we doing? We're not doing enough, to be frank with you. And I'll be candid. And I spoke about this issue with people here in the United States, but also I was just in Turkey and met with Uyghur leadership on the ground in Istanbul. For me, it's highly contradictory, and there's kind of an internal bigotry going on with the global Muslim population, that we have this pecking order of priorities, right? We all sort of run and dedicate energy, resources, attention when it comes to issues like Palestine, and justifiably so, right? When it comes to issues like what's happening in Yemen or Syria, but we tend to ignore issues of human rights concern and genocidal concern when they take place beyond the Arab world and beyond the Middle East. So we have to do more as a global Muslim ummah and population to help our Uyghur sisters and brothers in real time. We can't rely on governments, and we definitely can't rely on transnational human rights organizations. So we have to build from the ground up.
I am totally
Excellent.
agree with
Thank you very much.
Dr. Khaled said. That's exactly, it is exactly like that. The United Nations could not do anything because China has veto power in 5Ps, so like in the Security Council. So either the world governments has to remove China's veto power to intervene this genocide. If not, they cannot do anything. Even right now, the Human Rights Council that they're visiting the China right now, but I think the China are going to prepare the stages. They want to let them see what they want to see, so what China want them to see, so they can't find out the real the problem or evidences maybe, and they always going to be escorted and supervised. So I'm not very hopeful that they're going to find out the mass evidences and that they give some sanction, can do something or give sanction to China, but I am hoping for the good, they can find something and do the good thing and they use their power at least. And I think that they might have seen this 2,900 people, including children's photo, and I think that if they can turn away their faces, they can't be human, and how they could look at these photos and look at these people's eyes, and how they could do nothing and they come back from China and they say like this. It's already very late. These people, most of them may be already killed, but we need the justice here. So I am not very positive about the United Nations, but still I'm hoping for the good. And terms about the Muslim Ummah, this is a very good point that Dr. Khalid put it, because all Muslim countries are ethnic states. We don't have Vatican like a Christians, right? We don't have something in Islam. Even the Islamic organization, they in Pakistan they invited Wang Yi to give the honorable speech. So this is crazy, and I don't know what to say. I was speechless when I read the news. So like, why are we not Muslim? I can't say those Muslim countries. I'm not talking about the people, right? The Muslim people are really caring about what's happening to the Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims. But those countries, states, they just think about their short-term ethnic state benefit and the sacrificing Uyghurs, being silent for the Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims. But they should see how dangerous China is. They are the godless people and the godless state. They are worse than US, worse than any enemy. What's happening to East Turkestan right now and what's happening to the Uyghurs right now, it's going to happen to the world. If this should be very alarming signal to the world and all Muslims, if they do not take action today, this is going to happen to every one of us in the soon future if China lead the world, because they want to lead the world. That's their ambition, right? So we have to be alarmed, especially Muslim countries.
Yeah, Dr. Khaled, you heard Mrs. Rukiya refer to the current UN envoys to East Turkestan. She said she's hopeful, but she's not expecting much because of what she just described. How hopeful are you of what's happening to the result of the UN envoy? And you mentioned about the United Nations that there are some probably systemic blocks to its effectiveness. As a scholar of law, as a professor of law, what is the way out here? What can be done on an international law level amongst states and so forth to actually put legal pressure on China, if anything?
Yeah, so I think the UN envoy's visit was symbolic in just a vain, superficial gesture to save face, and to sort of like demonstrate that the UN is doing something. But in terms of function and in terms of impact, it's going to be very minimal. I think that, and the reason I say that is because to me, it was a very stark and strong statement that the world did very little to stand in opposition to the Winter Olympics that were held in China only months ago. In order to make direct legal impact, China has to be labeled a pariah state. It has to be labeled a regime and a government that the international community of states will not conduct business with, will not conduct diplomatic affairs with, will sort of isolate isolate until it's made some progress with regard to the way it's been treating the Uyghur people. We've seen this happen in short time. Like, for instance, after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, there's been, formal economic and political sanctions against the Russian government in swift order as a consequence of invading Ukraine. And we know that the level of mass atrocity in Ukraine doesn't in any way approach what's happening, in China, what's happening in East Turkestan with the Uyghur people. So governments have to be courageous and essentially put their human rights and political considerations above their economic interests. And that's not happening. I think that just to be genuine and direct, China has been very clever and been very diabolical to sort of, extend its strong economic might and its strong economic prowess globally to say that, hey, if you speak up against what's happening to the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, then guess what? There's going to be direct economic consequences that are going to be experienced by your country. And you can't have a transnational human rights community and collective of states that puts its economic interests above its commitment to human rights. So China has to be classified as a pariah state, and governments have to act in order.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. If you're just joining us, brothers and sisters, this is the Voice of Istiqlal, a program where we try to host conversations about the Uyghur issue, particularly with Uyghurs invited themselves to give their own stories from their own voices, through their own narratives, and also scholars who are renowned in researching the Uyghur issue and surrounding themes. And I have one final question. We have with us, of course, Dr. Khaled Beydoun, Professor of Law, and Mrs. Rukiye Turdush, a researcher and a Uyghur rights advocate. I have one final question before I'll bid you adieu. Sister Rukiya, how have Uyghurs, in your experience, in your circles and speaking to your friends, colleagues, how have Uyghurs reacted to the new evidence exposed in these so-called Xinjiang police files? And what do you think the consequences will be?
They were re-traumatized, including me. I couldn't sleep like 4 years. 4 days already. Like, I don't know. I just couldn't sleep because I kept searching. Every face is very familiar. Every face is like my brother, like my sister. I don't know, like my kids. That's so familiar faces. It's impossible to go through those photos. But, sorry, I know that every Uyghur in social media too, they were angry and they were re-traumatized. They were helpless, powerless. We are only praying to Allah to help us because we didn't see any other hope, that we feel like very helpless. I try to be strong. I don't want to cry, but it's impossible.
I don't think anyone
really
will blame you for crying. So may Allah ease your heart, ease the affairs of our brothers and sisters in East Turkistan and all of the diaspora as well, and give them strength, give them more sabr and perseverance, and reward them immensely for their patience and their perseverance and their calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're reminded that the Prophet ﷺ said that there's no barrier between the dua of the mazloom, the oppressed person, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah will answer your du'as and the du'as of the Uyghur brothers and sisters in particular, I believe, inshallah.
Yes, because if we were not Muslim, if we did not believe Allah, we couldn't alive like this. We couldn't normally work, or we couldn't do anything. I think I'm going to lose my mind. That thanks that we are Muslims, thanks that we believe Allah, and we know that there is a cons China is doing, that we believe that Allah will help one day. That hope giving us straightened, and we're still alive until today. And that China should not be too confident. They will come. We will get the revenge. They will face the consequence. This is not going to go like this.
Allahu Akbar. Empowering words from Sister Rukiye Turdush there. Thank you very much for joining and for sharing your valuable insights. And thank you very much, Dr. Khaled Beydoun, as well, Professor of Law. I just wanted to maybe give couldn't speak to without giving you an opportunity or asking you and encouraging people to talk about your new book and American Islamophobia. I just wanted to ask you, what this new book is about and what kinds of themes are relevant to this discussion, and obviously encourage people to get the book and read it.
Yeah, before I address that, I definitely want to, console Sister Rukiye and tell her that, people like me are trying our best to, amplify this issue in the United States and in the West. And my objective, inshallah, my commitment is to make this issue a mainstream human rights issue in the United States. The fact that it is an indictment on the American people, who aren't the brightest people in the world. So let's just be frank. Americans don't know what's going on beyond the United States. So That's another challenge. But inshallah, we can make some headway on this issue. My next book on global Islamophobia will weigh in heavily on what's happening with not only the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, but the diaspora populations across the world in places like the United States, Australia, Europe, in Turkey. So the book you mentioned is the American Islamophobia book. It's an older book now. It was published in 2018. Has been translated into several languages. But inshallah, this next book will address how Islamophobia is a global phenomenon and unfolding, across the world. And again, inshallah, it'll bring more attention to what's happening to our Uyghur sisters and brothers.
Thank you.
Well, I'm very interested in and eager to have a read of the book, inshallah, and maybe have you on once it's published to discuss it in more detail, inshallah. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaled Beydoun and Sister Mrs. Rukiye Turdush from Canada. Thank you very much for participating. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much at home. This has been Voice of Istiqlal, a program that we started to have conversations in the English language on the Uyghur issue. We invite Uyghurs themselves to speak from their own narratives, from their own paradigm, to share their own stories. And we invite scholars and experts in the field and related fields to what's happening to the Uyghurs, Islamophobia, war on terror, and so on and so forth. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much for watching. I've been your host, Salman Butt. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.